Theme 30. Direct and Indirect Speech. Index 1. Introduction 2. Relation with other themes 3. Current legislation 4. Definition of reported speech and general points 5. Backshift exception to the backshift rule 6. Other changes necessary in reported speech 7. Main introductory verbs 8. Questions in reported speech 9. Commands in reported speech 10. Exclamations in reported speech 11. Orders, requests, advice, and suggestions in reported speech 12. Modal verbs in reported speech 13. The concept of free indirect speech 14. Conclusion applicable to language teaching 15. Relevant bibliography. The theme I have chosen to write about is number 30, which deals with direct and indirect speech in English. In the first place, I will explain the different concepts of direct and indirect speech, and talk about the main changes that take place when reporting the language of others. I will deal with reported statements, questions, commands, exclamations, and suggestions, as well as how modal verbs change in indirect speech. Finally, I will briefly mention the concept of free indirect speech, before finishing with a conclusion related to some thoughts on how best to approach the teaching and learning of all these aspects in our secondary school classes. This theme is directly related to others, in particular numbers 19 to 23 and 25 to 27, which cover different aspects regarding verbs in English, and also to number 12, which deals with the concept of grammar and how to deal with this in our classes. The Modified Organic Law of Education, the LOMLOE, came into force in 2021 and has now been introduced in secondary education. The law deals comprehensively with the most suitable type of methodology to be implemented in our secondary school classes. The official curriculum of the Autonomous Community of Madrid contains detailed information about the introduction of grammatical points during the different stages of compulsory secondary education and bachillerato. All of this is established and supported by the Council of Europe in the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. In the first place, I will talk about the key concept that this theme deals with, how to report language. There are two ways of relating what a person says or has said, directly or indirectly. In what is called direct speech, we report the original speaker's exact words, as in, I have been here all night. The words quoted are placed between inverted commas, and a comma or colon is placed immediately before the remark. It retains its status as a main clause, though notionally it has the function of an element in the clause structure of the reporting sentence. Usually the words quoted are introduced by a form of say or tell put before the quotation. In direct speech, which is also commonly called reported speech, we give the exact meaning of a remark or a speech without necessarily using the speaker's words. The words of the speaker are subordinated in the form of a that clause and incorporated into the structure of the main sentence. It has no comma, and that can be omitted after say, tell plus object. It is usually in the conversations reported verbally, as in, he explained that he had been there all night. The conversion from direct speech to indirect speech entails various changes in the form of the clause. The most important alteration takes place in the verbal forms, and the effect is one of distancing. This is what is known as the backshift. There are also changes in the person of the pronouns and possessive adjectives and of certain words that denote nearness in distance or time, which I will mention later in more detail. Backshift takes place when reported matter is introduced by a reporting verb in the past tense. The shift from direct to indirect speech is normally accompanied by a backshift of the verb, as we can see in he said, I am tired, which would be reported as he said that he was tired. Likewise, I will pass the exam would become she said that she would pass the exam. When the verb in the main or reporting clause is in the present, present perfect, or future, no tense or verb change in the reported clause is necessary. This can be seen in the example, he says the train will be late, which would be reported in exactly the same way as he says that the train will be late. The rule of backshift can be ignored in cases where the validity of the statement reported holds for the present time as much as for the time of utterance. The tense form is kept in cases of universal truths, as in Socrates said that virtue is knowledge. For habitual actions like he said that he gets up at 7 o'clock every morning. Finally, when what the speaker says is still valid or current, as in he said that he loves Mary. Other changes occur when the introductory verb is in the third person, pronouns personal, object or possessive, and possessive adjectives change from the first or second person to third person. Therefore, a sentence like I bring my book every day would become he said that he brought his book every day. Words like adverbs denoting nearness or demonstrative change to corresponding words denoting remoteness, as in this is the book I bought yesterday, which would be reported as she said that that was the book that she had bought the day before. The main introductory verbs used in reported speech are say and tell. They are quite similar in meaning, but from the point of view of constructions they are different. Basically speaking, say has the meaning of to express in words, while tell generally signifies ideas like to narrate, as in he told us about his work; to inform, as in can you tell me how to get to Trafalgar Square? Or to order, as in I told him to go away. Say can never be followed by an infinitive, and tell can be followed by a that clause, provided that it is followed by the person addressed. With say, it is not necessary to supply an indirect object, but if an indirect object is given, to must be used. However, tell is always followed by a direct and indirect object. When the latter has final position, it is preceded by to. Other verbs like agree, explain, order, or command can also be used to introduce indirect speech. I will now talk briefly about questions in reported speech. When we turn direct questions into indirect speech, the changes in tense, pronouns, possessive adjectives, and adverbial phrases of time and place previously noted in the indirect statements also apply. Other changes are necessary. The interrogative form of the verb changes to the affirmative or negative form. The question mark is therefore omitted, as is clear in Where did you see Charles? Which would become He asked where I had seen Charles. If the introductory verb in the main clause is say, it must be changed to a verb of inquiry like ask, inquire, wonder, want to know, according to the shade of meaning to be expressed. If there is no interrogative word in the direct question, the connective if or whether is used to join the indirect question to the main clause. For example, did she go yesterday? Would be reported as he inquired whether she had gone the day before. As I previously mentioned, when a direct command is turned into an indirect one, the introductory verb say is changed to a verb of command or request, such as tell, order, command, ask, or request. The introductory verb of the indirect command must be followed immediately by the person addressed. On the other hand, the imperative form of the verb in the direct command becomes the corresponding infinitive, with an accusative plus infinitive construction. So, get your coat, Michael, and put it on would become he told Michael to get his coat and put it on. Regarding exclamations, these are changed into statements in indirect speech. Many constructions are possible depending on the meaning of the exclamation, as can be witnessed in How kind of you, which would be reported as She thanked me for my kindness, or What a lovely day, which would become something like She said that it was a lovely day. In fact, many exclamations are left out in indirect speech, and it is only important to report the sense. This is apparent in a sentence like, "Ugh, I hate canteen tea," said Mary, which we would probably report as Mary gave an exclamation of disgust and complained that she hated canteen tea. Orders, requests, advice, and suggestions in indirect speech are often reported by using an infinitive, as in the accountants have advised us to raise prices by 8%. However, the case of the verb suggest is different, as it is not used with an object plus infinitive structure, but can be followed by an ing form or a that clause, as in my uncle suggested my getting a job in a bank, or my uncle suggested that I should get a job in a bank. There are certain points to be noted in connection with the use of modal auxiliaries in reported speech. The basic rule is that if the verb of the reporting clause is in the present tense, the form of the auxiliary in the reported clause is generally the same. If a verb in the reporting clause is in the past tense, the auxiliary of the reported clause will undergo a form of backshift. Thus, I can do it would be reported as he said that he could do it. Similarly, "you may be wrong" would become "he said that they might be wrong." For the final part of my theme, I will briefly mention free indirect speech, which is a halfway stage between direct and indirect speech. It is basically a form of indirect speech, but there is no reporting verb and the structure of the sentence remains as in direct speech. Inversion, for instance, is kept in questions. It is therefore only the backshift of the verb, together with equivalent shifts in pronouns, determiners, and adverbs, which signals the fact that the words are being reported, rather than being in direct speech. If we take the original "why do they always have to pick on me?", this would be reported as "Maria asked why they always had to pick on her", but in free indirect speech we would find "why did they always have to pick on her?", with no reporting verb and the structure of direct speech retained. The use of free indirect speech for describing interior monologue became a widespread, if not standard practice in the fiction of the 20th century. The convention of free indirect speech is a more flexible medium for reporting than normal indirect speech and produces a more vivid impression. As a conclusion, I would say that it is important for our students to be able to understand and use both direct and indirect speech correctly, as it is an ideal way for them to open and maintain conversations as well as being able to report the speech of others. All of this is considered extremely important in the law governing secondary education and is dealt with in specific detail in the curriculum. Generally speaking, similar rules exist in Spanish, apart from some changes in the reporting of things like commands, so our students should have few problems assimilating this important grammatical concept. The bibliography I have basically used for this theme has been A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language by Quirk, Greenbaum, Sparbeck, and Leach. I hope you agree with me that my theme has covered all the necessary points and that it has demonstrated the importance of dealing with grammatical concepts in our classes from a student-centered viewpoint, using up-to-date methodological principles, something which can only be of benefit to our students.